The observation deck hummed with a quiet, electric tension. Ambassador Olivia Park pressed her palm against the cold glass, her gaze lost in the infinite darkness that stretched out before her. Stars blinked like distant, unkept promises, each one holding secrets humanity had only just begun to understand. 52 years. That's how long it had been since the first human vessel shattered the boundaries of light itself. Now, standing here at the very edge of the known universe, she couldn't help but wonder if they were truly ready for what was coming next. The message had arrived 4 months ago. It wasn't in words, but in patterns. Pure mathematics that transcended any language, followed by breathtaking images of worlds humanity could only dream of. Finally, there were sounds melodies that seemed to carry the weight of ancient cosmic wisdom. The message was clear. Someone else was out there, and they wanted to meet. Olivia had dedicated 30 years of her life to preparing for this exact moment. She spoke 9 Earth languages fluently, and had spent her career studying how vastly different cultures could find common ground. At 58, with streaks of silver woven through her black hair and fine lines around her eyes that told stories of countless sleepless nights spent studying, she knew this meeting would define everything humanity would become among the stars. Ambassador, their ship just appeared on our sensors. Captain Thomas Brennan's voice cut through the silence from the command station. It was the steady, calm voice of a man who had faced the horrors of combat and survived. They'll reach our position in 40 minutes. Olivia took a deep breath and smoothed the deep blue robe she wore, traditional clothing from her Korean heritage. The United Earth Council had chosen this attire carefully. They wanted to show respect, to prove that humanity, despite its youth, understood the profound value of history and tradition. She just hoped that whoever emerged from that darkness would see it the same way. When the Sovereignty vessel finally materialized from the void, it stole the breath from every single human who witnessed it. The ship was simply enormous, stretching nearly 4 kilometers from end to end. It seemed to be constructed from a living metal that pulsed with a soft, internal light. As it drew closer, 9 smaller craft gracefully separated from the main body. Each one was different, a unique design representing a different species that had already found its place in the grand tapestry of the galaxy. The meeting chamber itself floated in neutral space, a structure built jointly by both sides to ensure neither held the advantage of home territory. Olivia brought 30 people with her, scientists buzzing with an excitement they could barely contain. Linguists who had spent months preparing for sounds human throats might not be able to produce, and military advisors whose suspicious eyes watched every single detail. The airlock opened with a gentle hiss of equalizing pressure. The first being that stepped through made Olivia's heart race with a mixture of pure wonder and primal fear. It stood nearly 4 meters tall, its body covered in iridescent scales that shifted between shimmering green and brilliant gold, depending on how the light hit them. 6 limbs moved with a fluid, impossible grace, and its eyes held an intelligence so deep it felt like it could see straight through her. Behind it, others followed. A creature that looked like it was carved from living crystal, refracting light into a cascade of rainbows across the floor. Another being moved through the air itself, its form constantly shifting like smoke that had been granted consciousness. Then came a being covered in pristine white fur, with far too many joints in its arms and legs, moving with an eerie, silent confidence. The tall, scaled being spoke, and the translation device humanity had so painstakingly built crackled for a moment before finding the right frequency. The voice that filled the chamber was deep and resonant. I am Prime Coordinator Themos of the Galactic Sovereignty. We speak for 63 civilized species across 12,000 star systems. You are the humans of the planet you call Earth. Olivia stepped forward, bowing her head in a gesture of respect, but keeping her eyes raised to meet his. I am Ambassador Olivia Park, representing the United Earth Council. We come in peace, seeking friendship and mutual understanding. Themos regarded her with what might have been curiosity, understanding. An interesting choice of words from such a newly emerged species. Tell us, human, how long have your people traveled beyond your home world? 52 years, Olivia answered, knowing that honesty was the only foundation worth building on. A subtle ripple passed through the alien delegation. Some of them made quiet sounds that could have been laughter, or perhaps just expressions of surprise. Themos tilted his head, a gesture that seemed almost human. 52 years, he repeated. We have been traveling the stars for over 37,000 of your years. Your species is quite young to be reaching so far. The words carried an undeniable weight, a gentle condescension, but Olivia refused to let them diminish her or her people. Then we have much to learn, she replied, her voice firm, and perhaps fresh perspectives to offer. Near the back of the human delegation, General Patricia Okonkwo stood like a statue, her dark eyes tracking every single movement the aliens made. She was a tall woman with broad shoulders earned from years of grueling military service, her hair cut short and practical. Unlike Olivia, who saw a universe of opportunity in this meeting, Patricia saw a universe of potential threats. She had fought in the brutal resource wars back on Earth. She had seen firsthand what happens when different groups compete for survival. These aliens, despite their eloquent talk of civilization and order, were still unknown quantities. And in her experience, the unknown was almost always dangerous. Over the following weeks, humanity began to learn what the galactic sovereignty truly was. It was a colossal alliance of species that controlled vast regions of space, bound by laws that governed everything from interstellar trade to territorial disputes. They had immense military forces that maintained a rigid order. They had watched countless civilizations rise, flourish, and ultimately fade into the long memory of the cosmos. To them, humanity was a novelty, new, untested, potentially useful, yes, but certainly not an equal. We were children who had just learned to walk, stumbling into a room full of ancient, powerful adults. Dr. Hassan al-Rashid, Earth's leading expert in xenobiology, could barely contain his joy. He was a small man with warm brown eyes and hands that never stopped moving when he talked, as if trying to physically shape the incredible ideas in his head. "Do you understand what we're witnessing?" he would ask anyone who would listen, his voice filled with awe. "We now have access to knowledge that could completely transform everything we know about life itself. This is the single greatest moment in human history." But General Okonkwo saw it differently. She saw the way the sovereignty's military advisors analyzed their ship specifications. She saw how they politely dismissed humanity's technological achievements as primitive. They weren't looking at humanity as potential friends. They were assessing them as a potential resource or a potential problem to be managed. Ambassador Park found herself walking a tightrope. She negotiated with Themos and the other delegates, trying to carve out a place for humanity in this vast, ancient galactic society. She argued for their autonomy, for their right to grow and make their own mistakes. Themos was always polite, always listening, but his gaze held the patient wisdom of a being who had seen the story play out 1,000 times before. He saw humanity's ambition, their fire, their rapid technological progress. And he knew, better than they did, that such qualities could be just as dangerous as they were promising. The sovereignty offered humanity a choice: join them, accept their laws and their protection, and be guided into a new era of prosperity, or remain independent, a tiny, isolated island in an ocean filled with creatures beyond their darkest nightmares. It was an offer of a golden cage. The choice seemed obvious to some, but to others, like General Okonkwo, it felt like a surrender. To Olivia, it felt like the most complex and important negotiation she would ever face. The fate of humanity wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about defining what it truly meant to be human in a galaxy that was infinitely larger and older than they had ever imagined. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into the cosmos, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories from the great unknown. Lieutenant Commander Rebecca Stone watched the diplomatic proceedings from her station aboard the defense cruiser Valiant. Her job was security analysis, which really meant she spent her days looking for the things people didn't say, the details hidden between the lines. At 34, she'd already built a reputation for seeing patterns that everyone else missed. And right now, something felt very, very wrong. The alien visitors, a federation known as the Sovereignty, were offering humanity associate membership. On the surface, it sounded incredibly generous. Earth would get access to established trade routes and could even start colonies on pre-approved worlds. In exchange, humanity just had to share its technological developments and follow sovereignty regulations. It sounded like the deal of a lifetime. During the debate, Counselor James Winters, a man with a grandfatherly voice and a halo of white hair, made his case. "They're offering us a seat at a table we didn't even know existed," he boomed, his words resonating with hope. "This is everything we've worked toward." But not everyone was convinced. General Okonkwo, a sharp, no-nonsense military leader, fired back. "A seat means nothing if we have no voice. Associate members can't vote on sovereignty decisions. We follow their rules, but have no say in making them." Winters waved her concerns away. "That will come with time," he argued. "We have to prove ourselves first. Prove ourselves by giving away everything we've developed." Okonkwo leaned forward, her voice cutting through the room. "I've read the agreement. They want complete access to our medical nanotechnology, our agricultural systems, even our military specifications. And what do we get in return? The privilege of asking for colony rights and paying them fees for it." Despite her warnings, the council voted in favor. Humanity was going to join the Sovereignty. The president, Olivia Park, signed the agreement with tears of hope in her eyes, truly believing this was humanity's first step into a much larger, brighter universe. The next 15 years proved her both right and wrong. Humanity shared everything, holding nothing back. Our medical nanobots, capable of repairing cellular damage. Agricultural tech that could make barren soil fertile. Water purification systems that operated on a molecular level. We even shared our art, our music, our literature, everything that made us human. The Sovereignty graciously accepted it all. In return, they gave us breadcrumbs. Basic star charts showing safe routes through our local cosmic neighborhood. Trade agreements that were structured to always favor full Sovereignty members. And yes, permission to establish colonies, but only after paying huge fees and following a mountain of restrictions that seemed designed to stunt our growth. Dr. Al-Rashid was one of the first colonists. He moved his family to New Haven, humanity's first off-world settlement, orbiting the star Tau Ceti. At first, it was a dream come true. He was a scientist, conducting groundbreaking research on a world with stunning purple skies and 3 moons. But as the years passed, he started to notice a disturbing pattern. One evening, watching his twin daughters play in their garden, he turned to his wife, Yuki. "They're not treating us like partners," he said, his voice low. "They're treating us like a resource, something to be managed and exploited." Meanwhile, Rebecca Stone, now promoted to commander and serving on Admiral Okonkwo's staff, was uncovering something far more sinister. She spent months buried in the fragmented Sovereignty records they had shared, cross-referencing every tiny piece of data. She found passing references to 4 other species that were listed as former associate members. What happened to them? She asked Admiral Okonkwo during a private briefing. The Admiral's face was grim as she looked at the data on the screen. The official records say they chose to leave the Sovereignty, decided to pursue independent development on their own. But, Rebecca prompted, sensing there was more. But there are no current records of any of these species. No communications, no trade signals, Not a single trace of them anywhere in known space. Okonkwo looked up, her eyes locking with Rebecca's. It's like they just ... stopped existing. A chill ran down Rebecca's spine. You think the sovereignty eliminated them? I think we don't have enough information to jump to conclusions, the Admiral replied carefully. But I also think we should stop sharing every little thing we have until we understand what we've truly gotten ourselves into. Unfortunately, that warning came too late. Humanity had already given away its most valuable technological secrets. We now had colonies on 7 different worlds, with millions of humans living under the watchful eye of the sovereignty. The colony of New Haven alone had grown to a sprawling city of 400 million people. On New Haven, Professor Dmitry Volkov, a big man with a thick beard and an even bigger intellect, ran the Xenocultural Studies program. His life's work was analyzing the patterns of interaction between different alien species. And he was starting to see a pattern that deeply disturbed him. Every single species within the sovereignty, over time, began to follow similar development paths. Their art became standardized. Their native languages started incorporating sovereignty terms until they were barely recognizable. Their unique cultural practices slowly faded away, replaced by approved uniform norms. It was a subtle process, spread over generations, but the end result was undeniable. They're not creating a community, he told his colleague, Dr. Amara Okafor, during a late-night research session. They're creating uniformity. They're erasing what makes each species unique. Amara, a brilliant anthropologist, pulled up comparative data that confirmed his fears. Look at this, she said, pointing to a chart. The Vrin. They joined the sovereignty 8,000 years ago. Historical records show they had over 400 distinct cultural groups. Now, they have 12. And all 12 follow the exact same sovereignty standard practices. You could call it cultural evolution, Dmitri mumbled, though he didn't sound convinced at all. Or you could call it cultural extinction, Amara countered softly. They tried to warn the council, presenting their mountains of evidence. But they were dismissed. You're seeing patterns that don't exist, they were told. The sovereignty has maintained peace for thousands of years. That requires a certain level of standardization. It's a small price to pay. Then, the incident on New Haven happened. The one that changed everything. A group of human miners, digging deep in a remote mountain range, broke through into a hollow space. They had discovered ancient ruins, structures that predated humanity's arrival by thousands of years. The engineering was advanced, clearly the work of a spacefaring civilization. But according to every single sovereignty record, the planet New Haven had never been inhabited before humans arrived. Dr. Al-Rashid was part of the scientific team sent to investigate. What they found made his blood run cold. The ruins, the architecture, it all matched the description of one of the missing species. The ones that had supposedly chosen to leave the sovereignty and strike out on their own. When Commander Rebecca Stone arrived on site to lead the investigation, Dr. Al-Rashid met her at the entrance to the ruins, his face pale. They didn't leave, he whispered, his voice trembling. They were here. They built cities. And then something happened to them. Rebecca moved through the silent, buried city with a growing sense of horror. She saw the evidence herself. Scorch marks on the walls consistent with energy weapons. Structural damage that could only have come from an orbital bombardment. And then, in the deepest, most protected chamber, they found it. A data core, miraculously preserved and still functional, containing the final records of a lost civilization. The translation took weeks of painstaking work, but the message that emerged was chillingly clear. This species had also been an associate member of the sovereignty. They had discovered, just as humanity was beginning to, that their membership was nothing more than supervised exploitation. When they demanded full rights or their independence, the sovereignty had responded with overwhelming, annihilating force. The final desperate entry read, "We thought we were joining a community of equals. We were wrong. This is not an alliance. This is submission. By the time you read this, we will be gone. Remember us. Remember what they truly are. Rebecca didn't hesitate. She bypassed the slow, bureaucratic council and took the evidence directly to Admiral Okonkwo. She placed the data core on the Admiral's desk, her face set like stone. "Admiral," she said, her voice steady and cold, "we need to prepare for war. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more. We'll see you in the next one." The evidence spread through Earth's military and scientific communities like wildfire. Rebecca Stone stood before a gathered assembly of leaders, scientists, and a few council members willing to listen. Behind her, a holographic display showed the silent ruins of an alien city, the scorch marks on buildings that reached for a sky they would never touch again. It showed the final desperate message of a species that no longer existed. "They were erased," she said, her voice quiet but carrying the weight of a tombstone. She let the words sink in. Not defeated in honorable combat. Not given a choice to leave. They were systematically eliminated because they wanted freedom. Dr. Al-Rashid stepped forward, his usual enthusiasm replaced by a grim determination. "I've been analyzing sovereignty behavior patterns for 15 years. Every cultural practice they encourage, every technological exchange they demand, every restriction they place on our colonies. It all serves one purpose, to make us dependent, to make us weak." General Okonkwo, now in her 80s, but still commanding respect with her sharp mind and unwavering conviction, addressed the room. Her voice was like gravel, hard and unyielding. "We gave them our medical technology. They now control the supply of advanced treatments to our colonies. We gave them our agricultural systems. They now regulate food production on our worlds. We gave them detailed specifications of our ships. They know every weakness we have." Counselor Margaret Shun, one of the younger council members, spoke up. Her voice trembled slightly, not from fear, but from a controlled, simmering anger. How many of us suspected this? How many saw the signs and chose to ignore them because we wanted so desperately to belong? The room fell silent. The truth was a sharp, uncomfortable stone in everyone's throat. Humanity had been so eager to prove themselves worthy, so desperate to be accepted into the grand galactic community, that they had ignored every single warning sign. Professor Volkov pulled up his cultural analysis data, charts and timelines glowing in the dim light. "I believe we have 10 years, maybe 15 at most, before we reach the same point as the species whose ruins we found. Once our population is fully integrated into sovereignty systems, once we're completely dependent on their infrastructure, they'll present us with the same choice. Submit completely or face elimination. Then we fight," a voice called out from the back of the room. It was Lieutenant Jackson Torres, a fighter pilot known for his tactical brilliance and his absolute refusal to accept defeat. "We fight before they're ready for us to fight." "With what?" Rebecca challenged. She wasn't disagreeing, but forcing them all to face the brutal reality. They have 12,000 star systems, 63 member species, technology thousands of years more advanced than ours. If we fight them directly, we lose. Period. "Then we don't fight them directly," Admiral Okonkwo said, a fierce, unexpected smile crossing her weathered face. "We fight smart. We use the one advantage we have that they've never bothered to understand." "What advantage?" Dr. Al-Rashid asked, his brow furrowed. "We're young," Okonkwo declared. "We're unpredictable. We still remember what it means to fight for survival. They've been in power for so long. They've completely forgotten what a desperate species is capable of." Over the next 3 years, humanity prepared in secret. It wasn't easy. The sovereignty had observers on every human colony, their eyes and ears monitoring trade, technology, and culture. But humans had a skill the sovereignty didn't fully appreciate, a talent forged in our own tumultuous history. We were excellent liars when survival demanded it. Dr. Al-Rashid and his team continued their public research, playing the part of grateful associate members of the galactic community. They published papers, attended conferences, and smiled for the cameras. But in hidden laboratories, buried deep within asteroids and abandoned moons, they were developing something new. They took the sovereignty's own biological databases, information that had been freely shared as part of their cultural exchange, and they began to weaponize it. Not with bioweapons that would kill, but with targeted systems that would disable sovereignty technology at a fundamental level. Rebecca Stone coordinated a web of intelligence operations that spanned all human colonies. She recruited quietly, carefully, finding those who understood what was at stake. Former soldiers, disillusioned engineers, scientists who had grown suspicious of the sovereignty's generosity. They created shadow communication networks that bypassed all official channels. They built contingencies, escape routes, and hidden caches of supplies. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Torres trained a new generation of pilots. He drilled them in tactics the sovereignty had never seen, because their own warfare was clean, precise, and based on overwhelming technological superiority. Human warfare, by contrast, had always been brutal, messy, and creative out of sheer necessity. Torres taught unpredictability, deception, and the willingness to take risks that would seem insane to a logical, superior force. They fight like they expect to win, Torres told his pilots during a secret training session in a simulated nebula. We need to fight like we expect to die, but refuse to go quietly. Ambassador Olivia Park faced the hardest task of all. She had to maintain diplomatic relations, to smile at sovereignty officials at lavish galas, to attend the endless meetings and ceremonies, all while knowing the rebellion that was brewing in the dark. The guilt was a constant weight on her soul. She was the one who had signed the agreement that brought humanity into this gilded cage. She had been so convinced that peace and cooperation were possible. Professor Volkov found her one evening, staring out at the star-dusted void from her quarters on the diplomatic station. "You couldn't have known," he said gently, standing beside her. "I should have listened to the warnings," Olivia replied, her voice heavy with regret. "General Okonkwo tried to tell me." Rebecca Stone raised concerns. "I dismissed them all because I wanted to believe." "Wanting to believe in peace doesn't make you foolish, Olivia," Volkov said, his tone kind. "It makes you human. But now, we have to believe in something else. We have to believe we can survive." The moment of truth came sooner than any of them expected. A sovereignty inspection team arrived unannounced at New Haven, humanity's most advanced research colony. They demanded access to restricted facilities, a demand they had never made before. Their politeness was gone, replaced by a cold, unyielding authority. Rebecca Stone received the alert and knew immediately what it meant. "They know," she transmitted to Admiral Okonkwo through their secure, hidden channels. "Not everything, but enough to be suspicious. We're out of time." The Admiral, thousands of light years away on Earth, made the hardest decision of her long and storied life. Execute Protocol Exodus. Get our people out. Now. Across 7 colony worlds, a silent alarm went out. The Exodus began. They couldn't save everyone. There wasn't time or resources for that. But they could save the future. The scientists, the engineers, the soldiers, and the children. Ships that had been secretly modified for long-range stealth travel launched in coordinated waves, their engines muffled. Their destination, a deep space nebula where they hoped to hide. The sovereignty response was immediate and brutal. A fleet of their sleek, powerful warships appeared in orbit over New Haven, their forms blotting out the stars. The transmission they sent was broadcast on all frequencies, cold and final. By authority of the galactic sovereignty, the human species has been found in violation of associate member protocols. You will surrender all military assets and submit to direct sovereignty control. Resistance will result in sanctions. But everyone knew sanctions was just their word for erasure. On the surface of New Haven, Dr. Al-Rashid stood in his laboratory, looking at his life's work. His research, his discoveries, his dreams of understanding the vast tapestry of alien life. All of it was about to be destroyed. But his wife and daughters were safely on an evacuation ship, racing toward the darkness between the stars. That was all that mattered now. He activated the final protocol. From every human facility on the planet, a colorless, odorless agent began to release into the atmosphere. It was harmless to any living being, but to the intricate crystalline structures of sovereignty technology, it was a plague. On the warships in orbit, weapon systems suddenly failed. Communication networks crashed into static. Ship-wide power grids flickered and died. In a matter of minutes, the mighty sovereignty fleet found itself blind, deaf, and vulnerable. That's when the human ships struck. Smaller, less advanced, but now holding the ultimate advantage. They didn't attack to occupy or conquer. They attacked to create chaos, a window of opportunity for the evacuation ships to escape into the void. Lieutenant Torres led his fighter squadron through impossible, suicidal maneuvers, drawing fire away from the lumbering civilian vessels. He knew most of his pilots wouldn't survive this day. They all knew. But they flew anyway, their engines screaming defiance, because that's what humans did when everything was on the line. From the command center on Earth, Admiral Okonkwo watched the data streams of the battle unfold. Tears streamed down her weathered face, not from sadness, but from a fierce, burning pride. Humanity was on the run. They were fugitives, but they were free. She turned to her communications officer, her voice clear and strong. "Send the message," she ordered, "to every ship in that fleet. Let them all know who we are." A message was broadcast from the escaping human fleet, a simple audio file sent on an open channel for all to hear. It was a recording of a human heartbeat, strong, steady, and defiant. A promise that humanity had not been erased. We had just begun to fight. The transmission went out across every frequency, every communication channel humanity could access. Ambassador Olivia Park's face appeared, her diplomatic smile and careful words gone. Now she spoke with the voice of an entire species pushed too far. To the galactic sovereignty and all who hear this message. You called us young. You called us naive. You accepted our friendship and repaid it with deception. You thought we would submit like the species before us. You were wrong. The evacuation lasted 6 days. 6 days of desperate fighting, brilliant improvisation, and sacrifice that would be remembered for generations. The sovereignty brought more ships, overwhelmed human defenses, and reclaimed the colonies they had gifted us. But by then, most of us were gone. We scattered across unclaimed space, to worlds the sovereignty had deemed too difficult to colonize, to systems so remote they had never been surveyed. Humanity became nomadic, constantly moving, never staying long enough to be trapped again. On a converted colony ship, Dr. Al-Rashid continued his research, training new scientists in hidden laboratories. We're not just surviving, he told his students. We're evolving. We're becoming something they never expected. Elsewhere, Rebecca Stone coordinated resistance operations, building networks of information and support. Human ships would appear without warning, disrupting sovereignty supply lines, freeing other species trapped in their web, associate membership, and then vanishing before retaliation could come. And then there were the pilots. Lieutenant Torres, who survived the evacuation against all odds, became a legend. They have better ships, he would say with a grin, but we have better stories. And in the end, stories are what keep people fighting. The sovereignty declared humanity a rogue species, dangerous and unpredictable. They offered massive rewards for information about our colonies. They sent task forces to hunt our ships. But we had learned to hide, to adapt, to turn every disadvantage into an opportunity. 20 years passed, then 30. Human children grew up on ships and hidden colonies, learning from parents who refused to forget what had been lost. They learned engineering from Dr. Al-Rashid's students. They learned strategy from Rebecca Stone's tactical manuals. They learned to fly from pilots who had studied under Torres. But most importantly, they learned why we fought. Not for conquest or revenge, but for the right to exist on our own terms. And other species began to take notice. Quiet communications started reaching our vessels. Other associate members, who had seen what happened to humanity, realized they could be next. Some asked for help. Some asked for hope. Humanity, once the youngest and most naive species in the galaxy, became something unexpected. We became an inspiration, proof that the sovereignty could be resisted. That submission wasn't the only option. Admiral Okonkwo lived to see her 100th birthday aboard the fleet's flagship, surrounded by 3 generations of humans who had never seen Earth. She held her great-granddaughter, a child born among the stars, and smiled. "Tell me the story again," the little girl asked. "Tell me about home." "Home isn't a place," Okonkwo said gently. "It's what we carry inside us, the refusal to give up, the courage to fight for what we believe in, the love we have for each other." She looked around at her family, at the crew working beyond the windows, at the endless stars. "This is home now. Wherever we are, as long as we're free, we're home." Professor Volkov, now elderly but still sharp, compiled everything into a comprehensive record. He documented our first contact, their betrayal, our resistance. He made thousands of encrypted copies and sent them across the galaxy through networks the sovereignty could and fully control. "Future species need to know," he said. "They need to know what the sovereignty really is, and they need to know that resistance is possible." Even Ambassador Olivia Park spent her final years teaching diplomacy to young humans. But it was a new kind of diplomacy, one forged in fire. "Know when to talk," she would tell her students, "but also know when to walk away. Trust is earned, not given freely. And never, ever forget your own worth." Eventually, the sovereignty stopped actively hunting us. It was too costly, too difficult, and every attempt seemed to make us stronger, not weaker. But they never forgot the species that refused to submit. In their official records, we remained classified as dangerous and unpredictable. And you know what? We wore that classification with pride. 50 years after the evacuation, human ships returned to New Haven. The sovereignty had abandoned it, finding the memories of their failure too uncomfortable. We began rebuilding, but differently this time. No single colony, no central location to be targeted. Instead, we created a network of small settlements, mobile stations, hidden facilities. Dr. Al-Rashid's grandson, following in his grandfather's footsteps, stood in a rebuilt laboratory and looked at the ancient ruins nearby. The species that had left that final warning had been forgotten by most of the galaxy, but not by us. Never by us. He recorded his own message, adding it to the historical archive. To whoever finds this, whether in 10 years or 10,000, remember what we learned. Freedom isn't given. It's taken, defended, and passed down to those who come after. We are humanity. We were young once, naive and hopeful. They tried to break that hope. Instead, they forged it into something unbreakable. Rebecca Stone, gray-haired and scarred from decades of fighting, stood on the bridge of her command ship. Around her, a new generation prepared for patrol. "Commander," a young officer said, "we're receiving a transmission. It's encoded in the pattern we gave to the Korathi species." Rebecca smiled. The Korathi had been associate members, trapped like we once were. "Let me guess. They're asking for help leaving the sovereignty?" "Yes, ma'am. They say they're ready to fight for their freedom." Rebecca looked at her crew, saw the determination in their young faces, and felt something warm in her chest. Pride, hope, the knowledge that our struggle had meaning beyond our own survival. "Send a response," she ordered. "Tell them we remember what it's like to be trapped. Tell them we'll help. And tell them this: the stars belong to those brave enough to claim them, not to those who try to own them." As her ship turned toward Korathi space, Rebecca thought about all the years, all the sacrifices, all the lives given so that humanity could remain free. It had been hard. It had cost us everything comfortable and safe. But looking at the stars ahead, knowing that other species now looked to us for inspiration, she knew it had been worth it. We had wanted peace. We had offered friendship. When those were rejected, when we were faced with submission or extinction, we chose a third path. We chose to fight, to survive, to prove that youth and naivety could become wisdom and strength. The galaxy would remember us, not as the youngest species or the most naive, but as the ones who refused to kneel, as the ones who looked at impossible odds and said one word that changed everything: no. And in that simple refusal, in that absolute rejection of subjugation, humanity found something more valuable than any alliance or membership. We found ourselves. The stars stretch on forever, full of challenge and possibility. Somewhere out there, other young species are taking their first steps into the void. Someday, they might hear our story. They might face similar choices. And when they do, they will know that submission isn't inevitable. That strength comes not from how long you've traveled the stars, but from what you're willing to sacrifice to travel them freely. Our journey is far from over, but we have already accomplished something remarkable. We survived. We kept our identity. We refused to become just another voice in someone else's chorus. We remained human, flawed, stubborn, unpredictable, and absolutely free. And that has made all the difference. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories from the edge of the galaxy.